You are not alone on this planet, but you used to be even less alone. 30,000 years ago, you shared this world with at least two other kinds of human, maybe more. They built fires, buried their dead, and looked up at the same stars you do now. Then they disappeared, every single one of them, and somehow you are the only one left. That is not a small thing. That is one of the strangest facts in the entire history of life on Earth. Of all the human species that ever walked this planet, you are the sole survivor. Why? What happened to the others? And should that question make you uncomfortable, let's go back, way back. At its peak, the genus Homo, the broader human family, contained at least 8 distinct species. Homo heidelbergensis roamed Europe and Africa. Homo erectus spread across Asia for nearly 2 million years, the longest-running human species that ever existed. Homo floresiensis, a tiny human, barely over a meter tall, lived on the Indonesian island of Flores. The Denisovans left almost no fossils, but rewrote everything we thought we knew about ancient human spread across Asia. And then there were the Neanderthals, stocky, strong, fire-using, cave-painting humans who dominated Europe and Western Asia for over 300,000 years. Every one of them is gone. The last Neanderthals vanished from the fossil record around 40,000 years ago. Homo floresiensis disappeared approximately 50,000 years ago. Homo erectus, the great survivor, finally went extinct somewhere between 100,000 and 50,000 years ago in its final refuge in Southeast Asia. The timeline is not subtle. Every other human species began disappearing right around the same period, roughly when your direct ancestors, Homo sapiens, began spreading out of Africa and moving across the world. Coincidence? Scientists have been arguing about that for decades. The first major theory is called competitive exclusion. It comes from ecology, specifically from work like that of Jared Diamond, who studied how species that occupied the same ecological niche cannot stably coexist. When two species eat the same food, hunt the same prey, build shelters in the same landscapes, one of them eventually wins. Not necessarily through violence, just through being slightly better. A marginally higher birth rate, a marginally better immune system, a marginally more flexible diet. Over thousands of years, those small margins compound. One population slowly expands, the other slowly shrinks, and then they are gone. Your ancestors were better, not morally, not spiritually, just statistically. Homo sapiens had some specific advantages that are now well documented in the archaeological record. Your ancestors had more advanced projectile technology, longer-range spears, eventually bows, which meant they could hunt from safer distances and lose fewer adults to dangerous large animals. Researcher Stephen Mythen, in his analysis of cognitive evolution, argued that Homo sapiens had what he called a fluid cognitive architecture, an ability to blend different kinds of thinking together in novel ways. A Neanderthal might be an extraordinary tracker. Your ancestor could be a tracker who also invented a new trap, told others about it, and refined it over generations. That difference in cultural transmission may have been decisive, but competition alone does not fully explain the pattern. The second theory is climate. The period between 50,000 and 30,000 years ago was a time of severe and rapid climate swings, cold snaps that crashed vegetation, destabilized food webs, and pushed already small populations to the edge. Neanderthal populations were never large. Studies by researchers like William Buckley analyzing ancient Neanderthal DNA suggest their effective population size was tiny, perhaps only in the tens of thousands across all of Europe at any given time. A population that small cannot absorb many shocks before it crosses a threshold it cannot return from. Climate pushed them to the edge, and the presence of Homo sapiens may have been the final push. The third theory is disease. When two previously separated populations meet, they carry different pathogens, different viruses, and bacteria their immune systems have learned to manage. When those populations first make contact, the diseases cross over, and one side may have no defense at all. This is exactly what happened when European colonizers arrived in the Americas in the 15th and 16th centuries. Populations that had no prior exposure to smallpox, measles, and influenza suffered catastrophic mortality not from warfare, but from invisible biology. Researchers have speculated that something similar may have happened when Homo sapiens first encountered Neanderthals and other archaic humans. Your ancestors carried pathogens that other humans had simply never encountered before. And the fourth theory is the one nobody fully wants to say out loud: violence. There is archaeological evidence, not conclusive, but present, of Homo sapiens inflicting lethal violence on Neanderthals. Cut marks on Neanderthal bones found at sites in France and Spain are consistent with defleshing. Whether this was ritualistic survival cannibalism during famine or organized warfare, no one can say for certain. But violence between human groups is not a modern invention. It is ancient, and it was real. So, which theory is correct? Almost certainly all of them at once. This is what researchers call a synergistic extinction, where multiple pressures overlap and amplify each other. Climate stress shrinks a population. Competition over food tightens the pressure. Disease erodes immune systems. Occasional violence eliminates isolated groups that have nowhere left to retreat. No single cause is sufficient. All of them together are devastating. Now here is the part that should stop you completely. The Neanderthals did not simply disappear without a trace. They left something behind. In 2010, geneticist Svante Pääbo and his team at the Max Planck Institute published the first complete Neanderthal genome sequence, sequenced from ancient bones, found in a Croatian cave called Vindija. What they found changed everything. If you are of non-African ancestry, between 1 and 4% of your DNA is Neanderthal. If you have East Asian or Melanesian ancestry, you also carry Denisovan DNA up to 5 or 6% in some Melanesian populations. The other humans did not only disappear, some of them merged with your ancestors. That is not a metaphor. Those are literal genes passed down through every generation, since sitting in your genome right now. Some of those genes code for immune system proteins that help your body fight off certain viruses. Some have been linked to adaptations that help humans survive at high altitudes. The Tibetan adaptation to thin mountain air, one of the most well-studied high-altitude traits in humans, has been traced directly to a gene variant inherited from Denisovans, confirmed by researchers Emilia Huerta Sanchez and Rasmus Nielsen in a landmark 2014 study. The people you think of as other gave your body tools it still uses today. So, let's reconstruct what may have happened at one of these contact moments. Picture a small band of Homo sapiens, maybe 30 people, moving through a European valley around 42,000 years ago. They come across signs of Neanderthal presence, a hearth animal, bones cracked open for marrow, a smell of old smoke. The Neanderthals are perhaps a family group of 15. What happens next? Sometimes nothing, the groups avoid each other. Sometimes trade. Sometimes conflict. sometimes something more intimate than any of those contact, sustained long enough that children were born between groups, children who carried genes from both sides, children who were in a very real sense the first blended humans. Those children are part of your ancestry. What finally erased the other species was not a single catastrophe. It was slow time, declining births, shrinking territories, populations falling below the threshold where a bad winter, a failed hunt, an outbreak could not be recovered from. The last Neanderthals were likely small isolated groups, probably fewer than 1,000 individuals total, clinging to survival on the southwestern tip of the Iberian Peninsula in what is now Spain. The last traces appear around 39,000 years ago. After that silence, the archaeological record gives them no epitaph. No one who was there wrote anything down. They simply stopped appearing in the fossil record, and the world moved on without them. But here is what that silence actually means. It means that right now, somewhere in your hand or in your lungs or in the part of your immune system fighting off a virus this winter, there is a tiny fragment of chemistry that once belonged to a being who sat beside a fire in a European cave 50,000 years ago, who carried a sick child through a snowstorm, who pressed red ochre into the palm of their hand and pressed it against a cave wall for reasons we do not fully understand. They are not entirely gone. They live in you. You woke up this morning as the only surviving human species on Earth. But you are not as alone as you think.